Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to the Infrastructure Investment and Inclusive Growth Scrutiny Board. I'd like to welcome everyone that's attending this morning and remind everyone that the meeting is being webcast. And note that the link to view the meeting, if you'd like to watch it again, is on the meeting webpage. And then, of course, for the benefit of any members of the public watching the webcast online, we'll now introduce ourselves as a board, and then we'll follow on introducing officers and executive members later. So, my name is Councillor Hannah Bithell. I represent Kirkstall and I chair this board. And I'll go to my left.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Asghar Ali representing Gipton and Hare Hills.
Good morning, Andrew Scopes, Councillor for Beeston Holbeck.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Raymond Jones representing Horsforth.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Sonia Layton, Guyson Rawdon Ward.
Morning, everyone. Councillor Katie Dye, Killenbeck and Seacroft.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Karen Bruce, Ardsley and Robin Hood.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Mami Shazad, Moortown and Meanwood.
Good morning. Tim Goodall, Councillor for Headingley and Hyde Park.
Good morning. Councillor Diane Chapman from Rothwell Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Neil Buckley from Old Woodley Ward.
And Councillor Matthew Robinson from the Harewood Ward.
Good morning, Becky Atherton, Principal Scrutiny Advisor to the Board.
Thank you, everyone. It's difficult to know what to say for the next bit. We have had some really surprising news this week. A colleague and a friend has sadly passed, Councillor Mahalia France-Meir, and I would like us to observe a minute's silence, please. Thank you. She was an absolutely amazing community advocate and a brilliant councillor, and she'll be really missed. And I know a lot of us here today are feeling it, so we'll progress with her in mind. Thank you.
Just to say that she was a very nice woman, because I didn't know her very well at all, but one day she and I and other councillors had been to a meeting at Merrion House, and I don't know what it was about now, and we walked back to the car park here, and I walked towards my car, and I suddenly remembered that Lynn had taken the car. I said, "Oh God, I'm going to have to get the bus." She said, "That's all right, I'll take you home." And she dropped me off at the door. I thought, what a nice woman.
Yeah, that's absolutely on brand. Thanks. Okay, item 1 to 5, please, Becky.
Thank you, Chair. Beg your pardon. can start with item 1, appeals. There are no appeals of refusal of inspection documents today. Item 2, there are no exclusions. Item 3, we have no late items. Item 4, can I ask members to disclose any declarations of interest in accordance with the Council's Code of Conduct? I'll take silence as none. Item 5, apologies. We've had no apologies from board members today. And item 6 is the minutes, Chair.
Thanks, Becky. So our purpose now is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of November, the 9th of December and the 5th of January. We've been relatively busy. Can members please agree those minutes? Yep, I can see Councillor Scopes proposing and Councillor Layton seconding. Brilliant. Okay, next up we've got the work schedule, which is item number 7. The report sets out the Scrutiny Board's work schedule. We've got a site visit to a data centre taking place on the 2nd of February, which I know a lot of members are excited about, and we've got some really good levels of attendance on that. And hopefully that will be able to then inform some of the work we do on tech on this board moving forward. We're also in the early stages of planning the draft schedule for 2026-27, and we will be putting that to the successor board to decide on. And if anyone has anything that they'd like included on that, please let us know. And we'll also be, those of you that were here last year, I'll also be pulling together hopefully our one-to-ones so you can have that discussion in more detail with me as well. Look at Becky already writing down that, so that, because I'd not asked her to organise those, and look at this already. Wonderful. We ask you to consider the work schedule, but at this point, with 2 meetings to go, hopefully you haven't got any major changes. Is everyone still comfortable with the work schedule moving forward? Yeah? Lovely. Thank you. And we will now move on to the budget consultation. Can I invite officers and exec board members to introduce themselves, please?
Good morning, everybody, on this quite sad occasion, and I'm sure we've all got our own stories of Mahalia. But anyway, I'm Councillor Mary Harland and Exec Board Member for Housing.
Councillor Jonathan Pryor, Deputy Leader.
Good morning, Tim Rollett from the Council's Strategy and Performance team. I'm standing in for the report author Emma Camillo-Price today.
Good morning, I'm Michael Everett. I'm the Head of Finance supporting City Development.
Good morning, Angela Barnacle, Director of City Development.
Good morning, I'm Jane Wall. I'm the Chief Officer for Active Leeds Operations and Culture in City Development.
Thank you very much, everyone. Members of all 5 scrutiny boards attended a working group in December to consider the initial budget proposal. The comments that emerged during that meeting and the views of the members during the January cycle of meetings will be captured in a scrutiny statement that will be submitted to the Executive Board in February. If anyone wants to read that, it will be with the Exec Board papers. The statement includes recommendations that apply generally to the budget or to all boards, the board-specific and board-specific commentary. Scrutiny chairs also met with Victoria Bradshaw last week to reflect on December's meeting and to propose a set of draft recommendations for the section of the statement that applies to all boards. We've discussed these as a scrutiny board this morning. However, for the purposes of transparency, I will confirm on the webcast now those. So these will be the themes which are identified in that paper as the joint recommendations from all chairs. So there is a theme around the overall assurance. There's a real support for the council seeking to do that transformational work, but there is challenges in accepting that we have assurance when there is so limited information currently available to us. But we are aware that there will be further information in February, and we're doing much more work moving forward to make sure that we are getting that insurance in the coming year and over time. The monitoring of the savings delivery, given the scale of the ongoing challenge, the progress with the changes that are taking place will be monitored within the strategy and resources Scrutiny Board as well as via the Exec Board. And as chairs of the different Scrutiny Boards, we will look to potentially go to some of those strategy and resources to ensure that our areas are also. We are concerned around the pressures in adults and children's social care, and we are pleased with the commitment to contribute to the general reserve. The business as usual savings, Scrutiny Boards asked for more detail on the Directorate savings proposals, the BAUs, for anyone reading the papers, to be provided during public meetings in January 2026, and this has therefore informed our meeting, although it's only going to go to Exec Board. Obviously we've spoken to officers about it, so it will inform today's contribution from officers, putting a bit more sort of meat on the bones for the business as usual savings. Trade union engagement, we've sought assurances and they were provided about the trade union engagement where services are to be redesigned or budgeted full-time equivalents reduced, including via voluntary mechanisms. And then future consultation in the context of a multi-year settlement. It was looked at that because we've now got, thankfully, a multi-year settlement. That means we now know what money we're going to have for the coming years. We'll be able to have earlier engagement on budgets moving forward, so there won't be this mad rush in sort of December time to make sure that this is all covered. So we're looking for an earlier engagement next year. Is everyone content with those cross-cutting themes? Yes, lovely. Okay. So today we're going to focus primarily on specifically what sits within the IIIG Scrutiny Board. And Michael Everett will deliver a brief presentation setting out the broader financial context just for information, but I'm sure most of us have had those briefings already. There's been a different approach to the budget this year with an emphasis on cross-cutting themes, and there are no service reviews to consider as there have been in previous years. After Michael's presentation, Angela Barnacle will summarise Directorate-specific savings, including BAU savings, and please note that active Leeds does not fall within the remit of this Scrutiny Board. Much as Jane's here, we cannot talk on active Leeds. I will not let you sneak anything in. But she is here on all of the sort of culture stuff that we know and love her coming to this meeting for. However, we might want to consider some of the programmes of change set out in the draft council plan will apply to services within the remit of the board, i.e. organisational effectiveness and revenue growth. Okay, so we will start with Michael Everett, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. So, as the Chair's just set out, I'm going to give a quick overview of the proposed budget as presented to December's Executive Board. I'll outline some of the things that have changed since then, including the implications of the Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement. I'll consider for the next few years, and then I'll hand over to Angela to talk through the specific savings identified relevant to the Scrutiny Board. So we'll just wait for the slides to catch up. Okay, thanks, Becky. So this slide here shows the headline increase from the proposed budget for 26-27 as presented to December's Executive Board. This is before the impact of the Provisional Local Government Finance Settlement is taken into account. It is based on the assumptions at the time. So you can see from this slide that the net revenue budget is increasing by...
Sorry, Michael, can you just pull your microphone a bit closer?
Sure.
Just so it can pick up a bit there. Thank you. And that's the same for anyone speaking. Please make sure you can be heard.
Sure. Is that better? Cool. Thank you. So yeah, you can see from this slide that the net revenue budget is increasing by 70.4 million to 726.06 million, which is an increase of over 10% from the previous year, and it's met through a combination of revenue support grant, business rates and council tax income. It does assume that the council tax will increase by 2.99% generally, plus 1.99% for the adult social care precept element. And you can see that over 41.5 million of the increase comes from the council tax. So this next slide, this shows how the proposed budget is allocated across directorates. You can see from the slide that 64% of the budget goes towards adults and children's social care, and there's been significant investment in those areas to reflect the demand pressures being experienced. For city development, you can see there is much smaller increase, which reflects the fact that to a large extent the pressures identified in the directorate have been offset by savings proposals. Next. So this next slide, this shows how we got from the original estimated budget gap of 101.5 as presented in the medium-term financial strategy back in September, down to a balanced position for 26-27. There's been a review of funding following the announcements in the government's policy statement and the autumn budget in November. And together with a review of pressures and savings, this has reduced the initial gap by 62 million. This then left 39.5 million of new savings to be identified through a combination of directorate savings and the cross-cutting savings, which was set out in the November and December savings reports. And this is on top of £19 million worth of savings that had already been identified previously. You can see from the slide that although 26-27 is a balanced position, there are still gaps for future years, so 51.9 million in 27-28 and 69.7 million in 28-29. And we'll touch on the approach being taken to help close those gaps in future years shortly. So the council received the provisional local government finance settlement on the 17th of December 2025. It was the 3-year settlement, which gives more certainty over the next 3 years and will help with aligning council priorities to the resources available. It takes into account the fair funding formula, which has had a major impact upon the distribution of funding based on relative needs and resources, and it also consolidates a number of individual grants to simplify funding streams. There's also been a business rates reset to redistribute the business rates growth achieved nationally since 2013-14 in line with the fairer funding formula. So in summary, this has resulted in additional resources for general funding of 30.8 million in 26-27, 37.3 in 27-28, and 38.16 in 28-29. And there has also been an increase in some of the other specific ring-fence grants. However, although there's been an increase in funding since the proposed budget was published in December, a number of other pressures that require funding have become apparent. These total 31 million in 26-27, and it is possible that they could impact on future years too. So you can see from the slide there that adult social care demand pressures have continued to increase in the current year, and that's had a knock-on effect into next year, and estimated at £11 million. There's been a review of a number of other key budget areas as well, such as staffing, prevention and various running cost budgets. There's been a revision to the council tax base. There's also been an adjustment to the saving that was assumed from the West Yorkshire Pension Fund contribution rates. So this is the amount that the council contributes to the West Yorkshire Pension Fund. So initially there was a £15 million saving assumed for this reduction in the rate, but that's had to be adjusted because some of the saving gets passed on to grants and capital schemes, so you don't quite make the full saving, although there will be savings in capital and to the grants. And then additional money needs to replenish specific reserves that will be used to help balance the current year position. So that totals 31 million. So all of this means that the overall net revenue budget will increase by 101.28 million for 26-27, and that's after identifying 57.9 million of savings to be delivered, which we can see in the next table. So this slide here, this shows all the pressures and savings across all the directorates, and you can see significant funding of 66.7 million has been directed towards demand pressures, which feeds through into large increases for the adults and children's budgets. And you can also see the distribution of the 57.9 of savings across the directorates. There are a number of uncertainties that still remain. So demand and demography assumptions can fluctuate, so these will need closely monitoring. Cost of living is still an issue for residents, and that can impact on demand for council services and things like the ability to collect our fees and charges. The inflation assumptions are based on forecasts, and they can also fluctuate. And there are also some government policy changes still to be announced, such as a white paper around schools funding and SEND reform, and also around the level of rent increases in the housing revenue account. So looking ahead, you'll recall there's still a budget gap for the next 2 years. And to help with securing longer-term financial sustainability, the new council plan sets out an attempt to reset and reshape the council with 4 key change programmes identified to drive out longer-term savings. So these are organisational effectiveness, prevention, revenue growth, locality working. And for 26-27, there have been some cross-cutting savings identified already in respect of the organisational effectiveness and prevention work streams through external diagnostic support. Work is currently underway to refine and validate these, with further details to come to February's executive board. And as you mentioned earlier, there will be further scrutiny working groups to discuss these cross-cutting proposals further. However, because 26-27 is the first year of the new approach, it's been a transitional year. So it's been parallel run with the traditional directorate savings programme. And I'll pause then, hand over to Angela to take you through the city development proposals relevant to this board. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. So on this slide, you'll see there's about £1 million worth of efficiency savings that we are proposing in city development that come under the remit of this board. They largely come in 2 areas. One is through the cross-directorate, where we are further reviewing our running budget headlines, and also through increasing fees and charges where we have discretion to do so. They are relatively modest savings, which perhaps reflect where we've been as a directorate in terms of the number of savings already delivered and the fact that we're probably only 6% of the net managed budget of the council. And then moving on to highways and transportation, the largest one here is actually through movement violation cameras. I think it was about 2023 when we got the powers to take revenue and to into place cameras, which primarily is about safety. It's about making sure that the network can run efficiently and people aren't doing illegal or unsafe manoeuvres, and it's about safety as well. So there are a number of locations, primarily around the city centre, where we are still getting violations, which are causing us both network and safety issues. So we propose to increase the presence of cameras, which in the first instance will provide additional revenue. But actually over the longer term, it's about including that safety across the network. And then the other one here is a minor adjustment to winter maintenance. You'll notice that obviously over the last few weeks, our winter maintenance team have been out in full force. This is about how we're just driving further efficiencies with that. And then the final one on here is about just working right across the highways and transportation team about driving out some further opportunities to increase overall effectiveness and how we charge to external schemes. So overall, it's a relatively minor set of proposals in terms of the number. Actually, it's a change in how we are working, but they are all business as usual activity that we would do every year to make sure we were delivering as efficiently as possible. Thank you.
Right, thank you, everyone. Who would like to open the questions? Councillor Jones.
To go back to the last slide on savings in highways, I'm slightly surprised that that's on there. Bear in mind the recent bad weather, which you can't predict. I think that's a very difficult thing to predict because I've got to say that the people who've been out in the last few weeks have done an absolutely fantastic job, and we have to recognise that, but we cannot predict. So I think that's a hard one to predict. So I'm slightly sceptical of that one. Let's put it that way.
Thank you, and thank you for recognising the hard work that those teams do. In the hours when I'm in bed, they are out on the road, and the level of detail they go on to predicting where and when they go out, and sometimes back to back, is really appreciated. It's a relatively minor saving from relatively minor adjustments to the route. So we're confident that it can be delivered, but you're absolutely right that 1 in every 10 years, we will not be able to keep within this budget. And obviously with climate change, that is becoming more unpredictable. But we certainly think for next year, this is a relatively minor adjustment that we can manage.
Thank you. A follow-up at all, Ray? Sorry, Councillor Jones. Great. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions, actually. The first one is, I'm just a bit puzzled, actually. On the subject of business rates, there's been some controversy recently about the level of business rates, particularly with hospitality and that kind of thing. And the Chancellor did say that she was going to mitigate this in some way, presumably reduce them a little bit. If that comes to pass, does that have an effect on the revenue due to Leeds? And secondly, on highways, on page 138, there's actually a table, and the second item on it is highways maintenance. And in this table, it indicates that from 2026-27, the amount spent on highways on maintenance is exactly the same until 2034-35. Is that right? Because if that was right, that would represent a reduction in real terms of 27%.
Thank you. With regards to highway maintenance, there is an annual scrutiny review, and I think I'm going to look to Gary. Was it November? Yeah, he's nodding. In November 25, that discusses this item in detail. And I think at that meeting, we do report that the level of funding that we get nationally means that overall our highways maintenance ability is reducing in terms of, I think, again, from memory, I'll look to Gary, we think it's about 21 kilometres of highway per annum, there or thereabouts. We have 7,000 kilometres of highway, so forgive me if I'm in the margins, will be reducing. So I'm not disputing that table. It's all linked to the income that we get nationally about how much we can spend. And that's been the case for a number of years now.
And business rates?
I'm sorry, that's not in my area of expertise. I couldn't even give it a very good go. Michael, I suggest we take that back to corporate finance and get them to give you a statement.
Yeah, we'll take that one back. I think we're still awaiting the specific details of how that will work and whether there will be any compensation funding for council. So, as Angela says, I think we need to get some the updated position from corporate colleagues on that one.
We can also make sure that's appended to the guest minutes, the statement, so that it's a public answer as well. Councillor Scopes.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask 2 things. First one is around revenue growth. So one of the challenges this year for all the directorates is growing revenue as a way of getting income. And I just wanted to get a sense of your ideas about how we're going to grow revenue. I guess one of the things you've talked about is the cameras in the city centre. But I guess are there other areas you want to grow revenue? And the second thing, I just think, just following up on Councillor Jones's point, I would say most people I speak to want to see more gritting, not less gritting. And I guess the other aspect of winter maintenance, which touches on what Councillor Buckley said, is potholes which get worse over the winter. And so I guess there'd be a concern from me around that. So I know the member of Youth Parliament for Leeds, who lives in South Leeds, he's had a meeting with Highways asking for more gritting, and he's been told no. I guess partly because the budget's going the wrong way. So just I guess a comment about that being a real challenge for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with highways. there has been a recent workshop with members on winter gritting, and I know I'm going to have to turn to Gary again. Come on. I'll take the revenue growth question first, then while Gary gets settled. In terms of revenue growth, I mean, 75% of the budget for city development is externally funded or is driven through commercial income. And I know we're not talking about Active Leeds here, but Active Leeds being a really good primary example of that. The other, obviously, is our income that we receive through our let-out estate. It's our small industrial units, and we've always had a strong plan about adding to that stock to drive revenue growth as and when the economic principles allowed. Clearly, with the rise of the base rate since 2022, that has made that return slightly less attractive, so we've not pursued that at any rigour. The other areas that we are certainly look at is driving income through our pay as you feel through our cultural portfolio. So you'll know now that actually all of our sites either have a pay as you enter or pay as you feel mechanism. In terms of other areas and more innovative, you'll note that from the budget last November that the Chancellor announced the Leeds City Fund. So this is a 100% business rate retention scheme for the city within a defined area that's yet to be agreed, but primarily around the south of the city centre, which allows Leeds to retain 100% of that business growth, which allows it then to invest further to grow the business rate growth, which then obviously supports revenue services. So that's one of the innovative models that we're looking about, substantially growing revenue alongside everything about optimising what we're already doing.
Morning.
Oh, go on. I'll finish the revenue question. I think just in terms of other things that we are doing, obviously Kergate Market is an important city asset, and bringing forward the stack development and the block shop works, etc., will turn us into a net positive financial position when that's complete sometime next year. So that's really, a positive step forward for us. But also thinking about things like the Christmas market, the Thor's TP and City Square, they're all revenue drivers for us, and things that city centre management lead on, and some of the activities in our estates. The Lotherton Christmas experience this year was really positive, really good feedback, and has made a decent surplus for the city, but actually it's also provided a lot of activity for children at very low or no cost as well. So, all the events and activities are really positive for the city, and, the more we drive footfall, the better for the city. So Light Night and other things like that, and the announcement on Tour de France last week, which I'm sure you will all have been really positive about. So we look forward to things like that, kind of just supporting our base position as a city and the council as well.
Thank you. Gary, are you all right to introduce yourself as well? Because not everyone on the webcast will know. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I'm Gary Bartlett. I'm Chief Officer for Highways and Transportation. So just picking up a couple of comments then on winter maintenance. So what's in the budget here is just as Angela's described, it's an efficiency. Looking at, we haven't reviewed the routes, the 30 routes in great detail for a while. And there is a feeling that we could perhaps cut them or make them more efficient by maybe cutting them down to about 28, and that would bring about a small saving. So it's very much an operational efficiency. It's not about, it's how we do it in a slightly different way, but we will still be doing the same routes that we do today, if that makes sense. In terms of the worry over gritting our roads, if we have a really bad winter, and Michael might kick me under the table here, but it's always been the case that we have a set budget for winter maintenance in our budget. But if it's a really bad winter, the steer has been very much that we carry on, and we carry on doing our work, and the centre will fund the work that is needed. And if I can pick up Councillor Buckley's point in terms of the figures on Appendix 3 in that table, and the constant, if I'm looking at the same figure that Councillor Buckley is, I think that is a function of us waiting for the Transforming City Regions funding discussions with WICA to be confirmed over the next few months, which will determine the overall pot across West Yorkshire, and then obviously the individual pots for the districts. So at the moment, I think that's just a straight line allocation of funding at this stage. and hopefully will change. I think that's the answer.
That's correct. I mean, that is the capital allocation in that table, and it is subject to review every year. So every year the capital programme gets reviewed, and there is an opportunity, isn't there, to submit additional funding requests should the need arise.
Thank you. One of the things about scrutiny boards is that we get to be really challenging with officers, but it's also worth noting when something's gone really well. And I think while we're on road maintenance, it's a really wonderful opportunity for us to mention what came out in the press, I think, last week, where although our highways teams are under immense pressure financially, we are still one of the top councils in the country in terms of our road maintenance and utilising that difficult financial circumstance to the very best for our residents. It's not to say that there aren't still potholes. Gary will know I moan quite regularly. But when I go to other places, I can see the difference. Certainly when I go down south to see my family, it's a wonder I come back with any wheels, actually. And sometimes I don't, but that's a different story. Before I move on to my questions, is there any other questions from councillors? I've got Councillor Robinson first, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you, Chair. Two sets of questions, I suppose. One of them is on the moving violation cameras. So how much of the funding that's raised gets to stay locally, and how much is perhaps passed to the centre and central government? When we have speed cameras, obviously a share has to go to central government, and we don't see that. In fact, we see very little of what's raised directly coming back. The second relates to Councillor Buckley's point about the relief for pubs and the hospitality sector. I note what officers have said, that this was the announcements were made in the autumn budget, and then there was a suggestion that there were changes. Months have now passed, and hospitality has been through the Christmas period and is entering a really difficult financial position. The government can't just keep waiting and leaving us as an authority or businesses in limbo. So are we expecting any information this financial year? And should we be writing to the government as a board to ask for further clarity on that?
Who'd like to come in on that?
I'll try and do the first bit. Violation cameras. So that is locally driven, if you like, because our parking services work with us to actually carry out the enforcement and collect the revenue. So I think, Chair, I'd like to just double check with colleagues rather than say anything I might regret, and just to be absolutely accurate. And then if I can feed the answer back through Becky, is that okay?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I think that the movement violations would be a course, or the potential for a course, and courses, the money does stay locally. So you're absolutely right around speed cameras. If it's not a course, then the fine is not ours to keep. But that may be different, so we'll wait on the...
I'm intrigued, Chair, where we have perhaps locally supported some speed cameras. Would we be better having other forms of cameras that the budget stays locally in Leeds for enforcement, rather than bringing in speed cameras where Her Majesty's government centrally down in Whitehall does better off from it than we do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess the issue comes as to what the violation is. Like, if they're speeding, then no, this won't help. If there's no red light, don't put that in. Okay, lovely. And the business rates question, does anyone have any further comments on that?
I think we just have to take it away to our business rates team.
And based on what we get back, I'll email round the board, and if a letter you feel is warranted, I am more than happy to work with the exec board member and do some form of letterage. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. On the moving violation item, you said that it's mainly in the city centre. Is there an opportunity for us to do more out in the district centres and across the wider city?
Simple answer is yes. The issue for us is that many years ago, speed cameras, safety cameras, particularly down south, got a reputation for being put in locations where there was no safety risk, and they were just being used as if you like, a cash cow to extract money from the public. Everybody moved away from that and targeted them at specific sites where there were collisions. Probably swung too far then, but anyway, we're very keen not to be seen as completely revenue raising here. We want to change behaviours and make sure there are road safety benefits and congestion benefits. So, but we are keen to look at other sites across the city to drive home our Vision Zero 2040 ambitions, which lies beneath all this.
And of course, on that, if anyone hasn't yet signed up to the pledge, now is your moment to be reminded to sign up to our Vision Zero pledge. If you Google it, it comes up. Councillor Chapman, you got a follow-up?
Are these just about speed or other? Is it just speed and red light? Because what about roads that people drive along that have got traffic regulation order during the day? For an example. So where we have got regulations that stop people from using, or should be stopping people and businesses from using roads, can we use these cameras to stop that? Because that is behaviour that is both dangerous and should be changed, and in the short term will actually have a revenue implication.
Yeah, what we're talking about here is where there are turn bans or vehicles that enter yellow boxes and cause congestion. So we will look at specific sites where there's abuse taking place, and we will look at the collision record and see if we feel a violation camera is appropriate. As I say, we do not want to flood the whole city with hundreds and thousands of cameras. We want ultimately to change people's behaviour so that when they drive in Leeds, they drive at appropriate speed and obey the highway laws that are imposed. And they should be aware that they might get caught at any point in time.
Thank you. In terms of your specific TRO, I think it's similar to one that I've got in my ward. And when somebody's driving on that road that they shouldn't be at a certain time or something, it's most efficient to use the police for an operation. So if you get in touch with me, I'll help you know what to do to set that operation up. No worries. Okay. Councillor Layton.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question on operational effectiveness. So to meet the budget, there's a number of key levers I can see that are going to be used. Digital transformation, use of AI, increase in staffing around HR, likely to try and reduce sickness and reduce agency spend. There's a whole piece on spans and layers as well, which looks at maybe the management layer and reducing headcount, maybe a management layer from what I can see, but protecting frontline services. And some of that's not sort of squaring up for me, because I guess if you are rolling out AI, I would have thought that actually that would impact frontline services in terms of being more effective, not just from a management perspective. And then also thinking about sickness, if you look at targeting management, again, will you be actually removing the people who are actually going to be making sure that people do come to work and aren't off sick in the first place? So it's just that, really.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. Councillor Bithell, I think you said there was going to be a specific update at Exec Board on organisational effectiveness and prevention, didn't you? So that work is currently ongoing. In terms of, so I'd refer that to the content of the primary answer. What I would say in terms of our directorate is we have used and are hopefully using AI to drive productivity, which allows us to do more with the same amount of colleagues that we have. So we're certainly looking at it through planning, so where, you know, AI could read policy statements, etc., but actually you leave the on-balance critical element to a human who's experienced, who can make that judgment. Equally, we've used it in a number of other areas too. In terms of spans and layers, this is about dealing with perhaps a suitable management and suitable spans versus technical delivery. And I think there is a view that in some areas we have too many layers that actually could be stripped out and those colleagues be dealt with more effectively. And then there is another area which is dealing with consolidation. Around the council, there is still elements where you have multiple comms teams or multiple workforce development teams, where bringing them in together, we can drive efficiency and effectiveness. But it is a big work stream. Organisational effectiveness and prevention have been prioritised for development this year, given where we think there is potential to really, one, improve service and two, reduce cost. Thank you.
Any follow-up?
I think it's just, it's really keeping a very close eye on performance, isn't it? And making sure there's no detrimental impact and hopefully an improvement, like you say. Thank you.
Lovely. Most of my questions have actually already been asked. The only one that's left is around the gritting and the efficiencies. I wonder what's being done around the sort of the comms management of it, in that people will think when they read that it means that there's going to be a lesser service. And Gary's been really clear that isn't to be the case. It's just instead of turning left and it taking a bit longer, we turn right so that it's more efficient and we can have a couple of less vehicles. I think a real example of that is in Pudsey. The councillors bought a load of grit bins that they have no intention of filling up, and it's meant that almost the council's been brought into disrepute because the council's not filling the grit bins. And what I don't want to happen is then that to wider extent. So I guess my question is, how do we make sure that that real message is getting across to people so the council doesn't end up coming into disrepute because of false information in this case? Or how are we going to as well improve how we as a council hold councillors to account in terms of where we put the bins we pay for and how we're going to then fill them up, so that again we're not letting the councillors bring the council into disrepute over winter maintenance. Does that make sense?
So this is for next winter, not this one. Yeah, so the idea will be that the review will take place. Obviously, we will talk to Councillor Pryor as our executive member, and around the wider review that's taking place as well, we'll consider, and I suspect we will do a comms package to clear out some of the issues that you've raised. And grit bins is high on the agenda for the review.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, that's the end of the councillor questions. Have officers, obviously you've answered beautifully, but have any of you got anything that you'd like to just add on the end? Please don't feel like you have to. You're all comfortable. Exec members, anything you'd like to add on? It's worth noting Councillor Arif has also attended this item, as she wasn't here for introductions. I don't want people to think that she didn't attend for it. She has, and she's here. Everyone give her a wave. Okay, we'll close that item then, and we'll move to the performance report. Members will there'll be a switch over now of officers, and members will know that all scrutiny boards consider performance monitoring twice a year. We're asked to consider the information set out in Appendix 1 and to also identify any areas we may wish to carry out more detailed work. I'd really like to thank Emma for the work that she's done. I can't actually see her. But thank her for the work she's done on planning and play. It was really important to me that we started having performance indicators that weren't just corporate, but were focused on the things that we were really interested in as a board in our work schedule for the year. And she's taken that and run with it, and I'm grateful for the work that she's done around it. Given that we've had a separate discussion on employment rates as a workshop, I'm also going to suggest that we don't discuss the employment figures today. We have obviously limited time, and there's a lot in it for us to discuss, and a lot of it we covered in a really great amount of detail, and it doesn't feel necessary to rehash that. If there is anything that anyone would like to comment on, however, so that it's in the public domain from that workshop, then that of course is fine, but I don't want us to get into it elongated discussion around it. So, Angela and Tim, would you like to do any introductions, please?
Good morning, and thank you for those comments for Emma. I'll make sure I pass them on when I next see her. As you know, this report pulls together the most recent performance for the portfolio areas within this board's remit. The results are regularly reported to the respective directorate management team, where there's always a healthy discussion around them. We then collate the results and report them along with the other board area results to corporate leadership team. And the most recent review of those was back in November. And then copies of the results are then forwarded on to executive board members. So we're quite open and transparent about these results. And then we do an annual performance summary for executive board every summer. So again, these indicators are ones that we're quite open and transparent about. So we're now happy to take any comments and questions on those results.
Thank you. Just before I bring Angela in, I also have just realised I haven't actually got anyone to agree to any recommendations from the previous paper, which is somewhat remiss of me. Are we all happy to agree to the recommendations in the previous paper just for the purposes of the minutes? Beautiful, thank you. Angela?
I'm very happy to move straight into questions, Chair.
Okay, who'd like to kick off the questions then? Yeah.
It is a very, very quick comment about the unemployment figures. Just very quick. And that is that on page 166, item 2, it says the unemployment rate for July 24 to 25 stands at 4.7%, which sounds absolutely reasonable. That's in line with West Yorkshire and Yorkshire and the Humber and the England average reasonably. However, it says here this was a significant increase from 1.8% the same period in the previous year. Well, I think we agreed that 1.8% was wrong, didn't we? Weren't the figures wrong? Because that increase would be ridiculous. So I think that needs to be treated with an asterisk. It's not your fault, but the figures were wrong. Is that not right?
Hi, I think the figure of 1.8 was the figure for that previous year, and actually it has ticked up, but we have to put the usual caveats around the confidence level of the figures on unemployment. The numbers from the survey for Leeds are very low, which means the confidence in the figures are still low, but we have seen an increase in the unemployment rate generally. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so for anyone watching at home, there's a current issue with the confidence of the ONS, isn't it?
Yes, it's ONS.
So any data based on ONS figures is statistically less than significant for us to have absolute confidence in. Is that right?
Treat with caution.
Treat with
most
caution.
Definitely.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go through the items so that people are getting their questions on their designated sections, I think. Number of new business startups. Have we got any questions on that? Councillor Layton?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so in terms of startups, we've got a numerical over 4,500 startups at the end of the year mentioned, but there's no. I just wonder if we've got a target in terms of our league ranking, because we're quite low, aren't we? I think in the overall league ranking in core cities in the UK in terms of startups. Looking at it just numerically doesn't make sense, so I just wonder what our targets actually are there. Thank you.
Hi. We don't have targets around business startups. We deal with business and business support at that West Yorkshire level. There aren't specific targets. There are not necessarily specific programmes, just focus on startup businesses. Where we have some levers and where we have some discretion. We do work very closely in this space. Those numbers have come down, and there are multiple reasons for this, some of which is around the availability of employment in Leeds, some of it is about the attractiveness of starting your own business. Where we've had some funding, what we have focused on, usually in particular through our Adventure programme, is those very young businesses that have got growth potential. And we've also worked very closely with the King's Trust as well, around young people who wish to start their own businesses as well. And where we've had some discretionary funding, including through UK Shared Prosperity, we've worked with Bradford as well to try and target more of those business startups. So we don't have a target for this because the levers that we actually have to put on this are relatively small. We set ourselves up for failure for some of this. So we do work in this space, and we try to use the discretionary funding that we've got in order to really support those with the resources we've got.
Yeah, come back in.
Thank you for that. I mean, it's great that we're doing so well with scale-ups, don't get me wrong, but it is concerning that maybe it just feels strange to sort of, what if we just keep slipping down the league table? It doesn't feel like there's an answer to it unless we've got a target and a plan to improve that. Maybe it's something we're not concerned about as a city, I don't know, but I would have thought it was quite important.
So I think a healthy economy, you will see higher numbers of startup and higher numbers of failures as well, as people have the confidence to start a business and to try, and then to try again if that doesn't work. It is complicated as to why people are not starting businesses at the moment. Some of it is the availability of employment opportunities. So when employment opportunities are okay, people don't do that. There have been changes around self-employment and self-employment law. There is, I think, the impact when people saw themselves starting up businesses in COVID, and actually what they found themselves in is more insecure work. So there are multiple reasons for this, but that's not saying that we're not concerned. We are, but our tools that we have to do this are limited.
Thank you. Any other questions on any of the business, start-up, scale-up, survival? Okay, we'll move on then. Thank you. For growth in new homes. Any questions on growth in new homes? Councillor Goddard.
Thanks, Chair. Do we know how much of the growth in new homes is new student flats in the city centre? I ask that because a lot of the student flats in the city centre are let out to international students. There's a lot of fluctuation in international students at the moment. There's been another announcement recently encouraging universities to expand abroad rather than here. They're not always affordable. So do we know what proportion of those new homes are student flats? Do they count each individual student flat as a home? And do we have any idea of the actual occupancy rate? Because I have heard concerns that a lot of those flats are not occupied.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Goddard. Yes, so there will be a significant amount of student accommodation within those figures. I think off the top of my head it's around 30%, and there's around probably just under 50% of that is coming through in the city centre at the moment. So that's a trend we've seen for many years in Leeds, and actually that's been helping to sustain good housing growth numbers within the city. Several things on the design of those flats. The first is they're designed so that if they're not occupied by students, given that a lot of them are self-contained, they can actually pivot to other uses. So through the planning process, we do secure that there is flexibility in terms of what those flats can be used for. The developers and the investors bringing these flats forward are aware of the wider changes in the market, yet they're still coming and they're still meeting a need. What we are looking at through the Leeds local plan is exploring whether we've got the right approach to diversifying that student accommodation need, to looking at whether we need more emphasis on cluster-based flats to come forward, which would meet sort of different student uses. That's a piece of work that's ongoing, and that's involved consultation with the universities and Unipol. So we're hoping to see a bit more diversification of that need come through the Leeds local plan. But for now, my understanding is the market is building what the market can fill, and if it can't, there are fallbacks in terms of meeting other housing needs.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
Anything on occupancy rates? Do we know occupancy rates of student flats in the city centre particularly?
I don't know, but I can certainly have a look and report back.
I've also just realised now that I haven't actually given officers the opportunity to introduce themselves that have just come to the table. I'm not doing quite as good a job of pulling myself together for this meeting as I thought I was. So if we can just go round the officers, and if you can introduce yourselves, don't worry about introducing yourself if you already have. Thank you.
I'm Martin Elliott and I'm the Head of Strategic Planning.
Hi, I'm Fiona Bolam. I'm the Chief Officer for Economy and Skills.
Hello, David Feely, Chief Planning Officer.
Morning, Mark Mills, Chief Officer of Asset Management and Regeneration.
I've already done myself, but I'm Tim Rollett and Strategy and Performance.
Lovely. Thank you. Councillor Robinson?
Yeah, question on the growth in new homes in Leeds, and perhaps it's the way the data is presented. So, page 175, the indicator is newly built and converted homes, and the target is 3896. I'm reading that correct. There's then a comparison, which is over a 6-month period for last year related to the year before, that isn't the per annum figure, that it doesn't relate to that. Is the per annum figure then over the next page that's the 4,234 figure that's there?
I'll just confirm that, Chair. Yes, the 4,000 figure is the per annum figure. The 2,000 figure there is the first 2 quarters. So the progress towards that per annum completion figure for 2025-26.
Would it be possible for future reports, and this might be a Tim question, not a question that's going over to Martin, for that to be presented slightly differently on the headline at the front? And is it possible to have it broke down, I'm not saying by ward across the city, but perhaps by those areas like the different quadrants of the city, the outer northeast and others, so we understand where that figure is?
Yes, I'm happy to take those comments on board and adjust the format of the report to make that annual figure clearer, and then I'll work with the staff around the further detail that you want on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, Martin?
Just to say, Chair, just for information, more nuance and more detail in terms of that figure and how it's distributed is available in the authority monitoring report, and that goes through development plan panel every year, so it might be worth just making sure that that link, when it does, makes its way to scrutiny members as well.
Look at you with your glossy booklet. Good on ya. Any other questions from members on that one? No? So what I'm going to do next... actually, I'm going to ask a question. In the core cities figures on page 158, it talks about the new and converted dwellings, excluding older persons housing. One of the discussions we had in the chair's brief was around why we exclude older people's housing when it's the most important for them freeing up family homes in order to deal with the housing crisis that we have nationally. And my fear was that it was not being reported on and therefore not something that we were focusing on, and therefore we wouldn't be having the impact that we need in order to improve the housing situation more holistically in the city. And I just wondered if officers wanted to pass any comments on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, Chair, what's needed is maybe just a note for scrutiny, setting out how we monitor older persons housing, because the difference is that it arrives into what we call use classes through the planning process, whether that's homes for people with care and homes for people without care that are self-contained, but within that are nuances and complexities. So there's, like, for example, extra care, which is like a retirement plus model, which comes under the C3, which is that figure that you're looking at there. So that core cities figure will include older persons housing within it. What it won't include is older persons housing with care. So I can set that out in a note for members.
Thank you. Mark, I saw you debating. Did you get covered by Martin? Perfect. Okay, great. The next item is the affordable homes, but because we've got a massive affordable homes paper, I'm going to ask you to hold questions on that until the affordable home stuff comes up. And excuse me, so the next bit is the number of people killed and seriously injured in road traffic collisions. Any questions from anyone on KSIs? I know for those watching at home, we've done a huge amount of work as a scrutiny board on Vision Zero and KSI. So if there aren't many questions, please don't take that as a lack of interest from the board. It's just something that we've worked diligently on all year. And there doesn't look to be. I guess the thing that I would like to highlight is that while the KSI statistics look like they are relatively stable, what has changed is the number that have been killed. So there are a significant number of seriously injured, but less killed. And actually, that does show progress, and really important progress, because each one of those is a family that hasn't lost one of their family members. So, yeah, I guess just to note our thanks for the work that your team have done and how diligently they've allowed me to pester them for a couple of municipal years now and their success in getting less people to die on our streets, and that is a hell of a thing to be able to report. Thank you. In terms of the next item, it is transport services. There's no new update from WICA since performance was last brought in January 2025. That's a item that we get from WICA, so we'll also skip over that one. And then city centre footfall. City centre footfall. Any questions on that from anyone? No? I did again ask in the chair's brief around the impact of visitor numbers, the impact on visitor numbers at those venues that are listed, with the building works and such like going on. And I just wondered if Jane wanted to comment on that at all.
Yeah, happy to, Chair. I think in spite of busy refurbishments and works happening across the estate, certainly our museums and galleries service, we've actually welcomed over 1 million visitors to our venues this year, which is the first time that we've ever gone over 1 million. I think the last count was about 940,000. So in spite of works ongoing, and I think in part that's down to how we've programmed and some of the events and activities that we've put on within the museums to kind of encourage that footfall despite disruption.
Thank you. And are we also able to get a update on the pay-as-you-feel impact financially, please?
Yes, we can share that with you, Chair. After scrutiny, we will get Michael to provide all the detail.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, we'll move on to planning. Has anyone got any questions on the planning? Councillor Buckley, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Scopes.
Yes, I didn't intend to ask about planning today, but last night I was talking to a small developer in North Leeds, and he is a small developer. He has 2 projects a year, that kind of thing, and he's a very nice chap. He's not some kind of rapacious developer. Now, he said that dealing with planning at the moment was an absolute nightmare. And he said, to quote him, "They're incompetent, rude, slow, and never ever ring me back. And he said then they just refuse without any kind of explanation. Now, it doesn't give me any pleasure to read this out, but it seems to be a dreadful state of affairs. Could anybody throw any light on that?
If we can, I think that's probably a relatively specific case which officers will need to take away and look more detailed in. But if we can have assurances that that certainly isn't the norm, would be good.
We're very happy to deal with any complaint when it's made direct to the service.
And what is our communication strategy with, can somebody talk us through how planning officers do interact with developers?
Yes, Chair, thank you. There are a number of strands to that. First of all, we offer a comprehensive pre-application process where prospective developers and applicants and investors can engage with the service, and depending on the nature of that will involve different technical specialisms from across the team and from other service areas as well. Linked to that, we also offer planning performance agreements as well. So if there's a particular type of applications which are running to a deadline for all sorts of circumstances, then we can agree a planning performance agreement and try and meet those deadlines to achieve the positive outcomes that we're all looking for. So that's one area. In terms of when applications are formally submitted, we have a number of protocols in place which set out how those applications will be dealt with, and that cuts across householder applications as well as major applications as well. And as part of that, it describes the various interactions at different stages in that process, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley, if you want to forward me the details as well, we can look into the complaint.
If I can, just very briefly.
Not on the specific case.
Well, yes, but he has other competitors and they all talk and they all think the same. And what he's saying is that things are so much worse than they were 3 years ago.
I think it's for us to look at the specifics of the case, and then perhaps we can, when we have a one-to-one, we can have a discussion about planning and having that as an item that we look into next municipal year, if that's a concern. Councillor Pryor and then Councillor Chapman.
Just to say, Chair, I've been the exec member for planning for a year and a half now, and that's the first time I've ever heard anyone use that sort of language about the service. So I'm happy to pick that up, but I'm confident that seems to be an isolated incident, unless the people of Leeds are not telling me things, and they're not usually that shy.
Lovely. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, I'm sorry to have to say this, but whilst I wouldn't necessarily use some of those words, I know there are certain instances in our ward where we do have issues with planning, varied issues from pre-apps not being suggested, applicants apply for the pre-app, nothing happens. That particular case went all the way to appeal with the planning inspector, and actually the decision in Leeds got overturned. Rightly so. It was a ridiculous decision. And Councillor Pryor, I thought you'd been informed on that by Councillor Galton, but I can send details. We have issues with conservation and enforcement. We have got one very old building. It's a specific case, and I'm happy to pick it up with you afterwards, but the building has gone from being a house that needed something doing it to a house that's got two sides to it and no roof, attached to a listed building.
Okay.
So there are issues with planning.
I feel like there is the stuff that's in the paper for us to do today, but actually what's coming out here is that there might be some wider work, and what we won't get from officers in a scrutiny board is effective answers that get into the weeds of an issue if we just pop it up to them on the day. So my suggestion would be that we leave planning there as a sort of an open item for perhaps looking at. You can still come in on something else. Yeah, no, don't worry, I've got a question too. But these sort of communication-y type stuff, and then we can have that discussion with officers, get the information that we need to get the assurance that we need that it is working effectively on the whole. There will always in everything be the odd isolated incident. We just need to assure ourselves that they are isolated incidents. Councillor Robinson, then Councillor Scopes.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so within the report on planning applications, it talks about AI and AI supporting officers' decision making. Question 1, is there a way to track the number of applications that have been supported by AI in the decision making, so we can see if that's growing and if officers are using it? And secondly, is there the opportunity in future to use AI to make an indicative decision to speed officers' time up? So there is a way that we use in large language models that we can put policies, plans, core strategies, etc. into an LLM, and then it would allow you to have a piece of software that processes an application and gives you an indicative decision. Is that something that's being considered?
Thank you, Councillor Robinson, for your question. Just on the use of AI, I think it's fair to say we're at a relatively early stage. It's evolving technology. It's being used in different ways across different organisations, etc., etc. And we are, through planning, trying to strengthen and improve our digital offer in terms of how we operate as a service. The benefits of that are greater efficiencies within the service, as well as better back office systems, etc., to enable us to have the tools to make decisions through the formal process as well. So at the moment there is 1 or 2 discovery projects which are underway, which we're looking at the application of new systems and processes, a company called Xylo that we're working with very closely. We're also looking at other aspects of AI technology and digital. So in terms of how it's been used, I think at the moment I couldn't quantify the specific number of applications it's been used on. It's been used to organise back office information so that officers are able to assemble the tools, if you like, in terms of sorting documents, how that works on our system in terms of the back office system. So it's a tool to enable that frontline activity. And in terms of your second question about indicative decision making, we're not at a point yet where that is in place. I think we want to just take this one step at a time in terms of the technologies we're currently looking at, but beyond that we'll see what comes along and how we can use that within the context of human decision making and officer judgments based upon the planning requirements that we have to adhere to.
I suppose the follow-up would be that officers always will have to be at the heart of and owning a final decision, but I think we can move faster in having AI help us and support us in this, and I appreciate that's not just the planning officers, it requires a service change across the council, but I'm mindful we won't have you forever. I'm almost thinking Feeney AI, to make sure that you live on forever in planning, David.
Well, this got weird. In terms of moving forward Scrutiny Board wise, I think there will be AI, and it comes up every meeting, and in terms of the transformation work that's ongoing with the council, that tech element and how we can best use not just AI but all sorts of different tech in order to improve efficiency within the council, not to remove David and replace him with AI, almost like Futurama, that sort of head in a jar situation, I think is probably something that we can keep coming back to, and perhaps we can look at some form of workshop-y type discussion around how that will fit into the transformation work next municipal year. Councillor Scopes.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support that suggestion you just made. I'm looking at page 186 of the pack for reference. So really good to see that the speed at which minor applications are agreed is seems to be on an improving trend, so that's really positive. I guess the question for the Scrutiny's perspective question is around what the tail looks like. So how many do we have that have taken much longer than that? And the context for my question is, and I'm sure this is a one-off, is I've got an application in front of me here that says it was validated on the 15th of March 2024, and its current state and its status is current. So I guess that's just I don't want to look at this specific case here, but I think there's a question about what the tail is for the 9%. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Councillor Scopes. We can look at that in more detail, but there are examples and different issues relating to individual applications, so it's difficult to generalise. I think, as referred to in the report, we do talk about extensions of time in there as well, where we're discussing with applicants an extension of the statutory period to give more time. Some of the delays are down to awaiting information from the applicant or from a statutory body, or it could be other technical reasons as well. So there's a wide range of circumstances which apply, but if it's a specific thing and you wanted to raise it with me outside of this meeting in terms of your own area, then I'd be happy to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I can raise that with you separately. I guess the question is really, how's that look across? I don't know whether there's a graph you can do in sort of the tail, just so we can understand whether this is just a genuine one-off, or whether there's a dozen or 1,000 or whatever it is. And I think just to get a sense of that, so it says 91.8% dealt with in 8 weeks, which is absolutely fantastic statistic. I'm just trying to understand the tail end from the scrutiny perspective. Thank you.
Yes, there's some data on how long those extras are taking would be really helpful. And if you do include that in the report, if you can put a little bit of narrative around what the reasons for them are, because sometimes, of course, there's fully legitimate reasons why planning applications take a lot longer than others. So we also don't want to go too far the other way of relying on the timings and not understanding the nuance, if you will. Okay, we'll move very quickly, Goddard.
Goodall. I am Councillor Goodall. Just really quickly on the historical data on page 186, I'm just double checking what that refers to, because for 24-25 the major says 87.8. Is that the same as, because in the table above it says 88.7? Is that just a typo, or am I not understanding what the historical data refers to there?
Sorry, Councillor, could you just refer to that again, please? Is it on?
So the lower table, which just says historical data.
Is page 185? Sorry.
186.
Oh,
186.
Sorry.
So it's that lower table with historical data. I'm just trying to understand. It doesn't. That 87.8 for 24-25. I can't see that number anywhere else. So I'm just trying to work out exactly what it refers to. Thank you. Trying to get that.
For those on the webcast, Councillor Scopes just explained the slightly different data. And I'm very sorry. We used to have a councillor called Councillor Goddard, and apparently I've just decided that you have moulded into one name-wise. No, but that's awful, and I do apologise. So we will move on to the additional areas for scrutiny that we requested. Does anyone else have any questions on play-in planning? It will come as no surprise to any of you that I do. Okay, great. So one of the... we get a lot of different, or we're getting now some bits of data around play-in planning, and we're trying to work out which bits moving forward we're going to want to have join the report. So it talks about the children and young people's equipped play facilities, and the current standard being 2 facilities per 1,000 people for formal play areas. So we can have come to us as a board how many of our city's children have the correct number of play for 2 facilities per 1,000 people. I guess, so that feels like a really important piece of data for us to bring in. What I did wonder is whether there's anything around the distance, because as much as I desperately want to fight for more play areas in Kirkstall, and always in Kirkstall, in real terms on a city-wide level, because the population is so much closer together, actually the distance 1,000 people having 2 play areas would cover versus, for example, Wetherby or others of our more rural neighbourhoods, if that 1,000 people is spread over a 3-mile area, then 2 play areas isn't enough for those young people because a play area isn't just about going and playing. It's about when you're a teenager, getting that bit of independence of your parents being able to let you go somewhere safe, but know that you're learning how to cross roads effectively, so there's that element of the distance and how we can use that to support young people to develop and grow. And then also, ironically, I've just said learning how to cross roads, but is there more information on the route that people have to take? So actually, when we're planning where play areas go and when we're saying, is there play areas in the right places, are we looking at the route that people have to go and whether they have to cross main roads in order to get to the play area? Because a play area might be 100 yards away, but actually if the M62 is in the middle, it might as well be on Mars. Obviously, I'm using hyperbole to make the point, but there's a bunch of roads we've all got in our wards where there is unsafe crossing practices for young people. So they're the 2 elements of it that I'd like to see developed from what we've got in here. Thank you. Nobody has to answer if they don't want to. Martin?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Biffle. So on the first, that really fits neatly with work currently being done to extend the complete, compact and connected brackets 20-minute neighbourhoods approach that was set out within the Leeds local plan. So we're now looking at green space accessibility within that, and we can include play. The second element that you've just mentioned, in terms of localised impacts and impediments, is inevitably a more complex and detailed piece of work. So I suggest what we'll do is we'll bring that forward in phases so that at least you've got the headlines. And then I suspect what might work is if we take a particular part of the city and just do a little bit of a deep dive to show the whole thing and how that looks before we widen that out to all 33 wards.
Lovely. Kirkstall volunteers as tribute. Councillor Jones?
Just to add something to that, Hannah, I'm intrigued as how we decide where parks are, particularly because in my location we have 3 parks that are very close together. Then we have a massive area where there's no park, but we have loads of sort of back-to-back housing. So I'm intrigued as to how we decide where parks go. I find it very, very strange that in probably the poorer part of my area, basically, is that we have no park, but yet in probably where people have a bit more cash and there's 3 parks that are very close together. So I'm intrigued. Is there any explanation of how we arrive at that? Because I'm slightly confused by it, to be honest.
If I could come in, Chair, if that would be helpful. I can understand your question, Councillor. I think part of it is that there's a bit of a historical legacy, isn't there, of green spaces and where they are and how they've been configured across the city. And there's a whole host of different characteristics, formal parks, more informal amenity spaces, children's play areas, etc. So within planning we have a typology of all of those different types of green spaces. And one of the key things we've done over the years through the planning policies we have is to try and protect what we've got. So that existing provision has been safeguarded, and that provides a basis then for it to be improved and utilised by the communities they serve. I think in terms of new development, where there are proposals for major schemes, one of the things we are wanting to see is effective master planning so that green spaces and green corridors and biodiversity, etc., can be all integrated and configured as part of the development in a more holistic way, so it makes a bit more sense in terms of how it relates to the community and its accessibility. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. I really love the fact that on scrutiny boards, what you don't necessarily anticipate will be the big talking point becomes the big talking point, and then it kind of sets you up for the next year's work. So do members feel comfortable with us looking to, while we're developing that 2026-27 work programme, to do some deeper dive into planning and the play and all that sort of bits and pieces? Beautiful. Okay, next up we've got active travel. Has anyone got any questions on active travel? very limited in terms of the data currently provided, but we can pick if we want any of those items of data moving forward, or you can just leave it to me to decide. That's also acceptable, but I thought I'd not dictate. No? Okay, I'll go back to dictating. Excellent. Hold on. Councillor Dye?
I think we absolutely should.
Any particular one of them?
What, in terms of the active travel? Well, I think it's just important for us to get a real sense of what's happening across the city. So anything that can feed into that picture, I think will be really helpful. So, the more data we're able to use, the better.
Okay, so we'll be looking towards probably I think there's 5 different reportables that she's mentioned in here. Councillor Robinson?
Chair, I'm just considering how you're doing this, because obviously there'll be active travel to Leeds city centre. There could be active travel to Bradford. There'll be active travel to from North Leeds to Wetherby and vice versa. How are we going to measure that as a metric? And on that basis, presumably we need a little turtleizer which says, percentage of people who've travelled by mass transit, and we could update that accordingly as we build the line in future, because that would have to be included in some of this. You'd get so many different metrics. How would we get down to 1 or 2 that are really tight and measurable for the officers?
So I think that's why she's included these 5. So these bullet points are suggestions that she could bring forward. So the ones that we've got are the percentage of adults who walk or cycle for travel purposes, not specifying where they are, once a week. Then we've got the city centre modal share, which obviously is based specifically on the city centre. Then we've got rate of residents cycling at least once a week. We've got the census for how people travel to work. So again, that could be wherever they happen to work. And then we also have the, again, geographically based counts that we do. So I guess I can work with Emma to find out what of those is manageable, but there is the breadth there for us to get that level of detail. We just need to work out what is the most efficient way to do that. So yeah, that's a good point. Okay, Councillor Dye?
Yeah, just to add, I agree with that completely, with the idea that it could turn into a massive piece of work, but it's worth exploring, isn't it? It's worth looking at what's manageable, and I wouldn't for a minute say let's give people a huge task that isn't possible, but if we can look at all of them and see what's doable, then we can come up with something that we can work with.
Beautiful. I'm going to bring in Councillor Chapman, and then I'm going to close this one off.
Just a quick one. Could we include travel to school? What percentage of kids walk or ride a bike to school, and then maybe look at, if it's low, why is it low, and what we can do to make that safer and better? Because
I think that's covered in the My Health, My School survey, so I think that would be quite an easy indicator to pull, because I think we've got access to that core data. Some exec members are nodding at me, so I'm going to go with the fact I'm right, because they're always right. They're not always right. Okay, we'll go on to the local government outcomes framework. There was an expectation that we would get the final framework and the data from it by this meeting. That hasn't happened, so Emma will come back to us with that data as and when it is actually ready. Unfortunately, that is completely out of our hands. It comes from on high. And with that, unless anyone has from the officers or exec members anything they'd particularly like to add, we've given that a good airing and got some, most importantly, some good ideas for next year's future areas of work. So are we happy to accept the recommendations? There we go, I'm learning. I'm going to call for a comfort break for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and do affordable housing. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll move on now to item 10, Leeds Affordable Housing Plan. We really welcome the early sight of this draft plan for member comment. It is how Scrutiny does its absolute best work, is when officers are brave enough to bring us stuff that isn't polished yet. And I'm really grateful. And I also want to highlight a particular success in relation to the proportion of affordable homes delivered at social rent. 38% of new affordable homes were delivered as social rent, as opposed to the national average of 14.5. I know that my residents, a bunch of them, really need those social homes. And actually, we've when we were doing the chair's brief, one of the things that we spoke about was that graph, which I asked you to put in, where you get to see the average income and what is actually affordable for the people in our city. And that shows just how important the social rent is. And it's incredible that in Leeds, we are doing the work to meet that need better than the rest of the nation. And I'm really, really proud of that. A bit more than the bullet that was written on here, but that's Chair's prerogative. And then on a personal note, given my work in this area with Ed Whiting, I want to welcome reference to demand for specialist accommodation, including supporting our LGBTQ community. I'm really glad that we're able to bring that forward. Okay, excuse me. Councillor Harlan, would you like to make any introductory comments?
Thank you, Chair. Just really to say that as the incoming member, I'm really proud to see that we're leading the core city for affordable housing, delivering over 1,900 affordable homes over the last period. And Scrutiny's input into this is really important, and I'm sure you'll be following it going forward. I think I'll hand over to officers. I'm sure there's plenty of questions, but I'd also like to thank the officers for the work that they've done, and the report is really beneficial to me too as a newbie. It's been an education, shall I say, but yeah, I'll hand over to officers because I'm sure there's plenty of questions.
Thank you. Krista, you're screen sharing and doing a presentation, I believe, yeah?
Yes, I am. I'm Krista Jolly and I'm Exec Manager for Asset Management and Regeneration. And this report is really leading on in terms of our affordable housing delivery as partners across the city. You've all engaged in that work previously with our registered provider partners, development partners, Homes England and the Combined Authority. So to really highlight this is a partnership plan. It's not just the City Council that can deliver this in isolation. We need all our partners with us on this journey. Just to recap in terms of the action plan that we had for 2022-25, as has been highlighted by Councillor Biffle, we have delivered 1,900 affordable homes over the last period, an average of 619 per annum. Which is an excellent kind of delivery. We are one of the leading core cities. We were the leading core city until last year, just recently overtaken by Birmingham over the last year, but we deliver a significant number of affordable homes compared to other core cities, which is really positive news. The pie chart you can see here shows how we deliver our affordable homes. So over the last period, you can see that the Section 106 delivery through kind of developers has been, and the Section 106 delivery through RPs that acquired properties from developers has been 35%. Leeds City Council direct delivery is 26%, and our registered provider direct delivery is 39%. So you can see there that we need all of those components to come together to make sure that we deliver those homes that we need. Having said all that, we know that we need to do more. And as Councillor Biffle referenced, this is the chart that's been included in the report. You'll see here, obviously the detail you can see in the report, but you'll see here that there are a number of products that are listed along the bottom axis there. So that ranges from social rent at one end to market rent, average market rent and average market sales at the other end on the right-hand side. Anything under the lines is affordable. So you'll see the dotted line references 1.5 times living wage, and the solid line references 2 times living wage. So you can see there the products for social rented and discounted home ownership for shared ownership are just about affordable. The market products in terms of market rent, lower quartile market rent, some of the affordable rent products that we see in the city, and market sales are all kind of looking unaffordable for those on those income levels. So there's some massive challenges that we've got in terms of making our housing market work and function for us. We now have an affordable housing need, according to the new Strategic Housing Market Assessment in 2025, of 1,518 homes per annum that we need to deliver. And we need to meet that demand as far as we possibly can, which is a massive challenge for us as a city. And as I said on those kind of bullet points there, affordable housing supply to give 105 homes over, the affordable housing delivery, when you take right to buy into account, over the last 10 years, has been 105 homes. So when we take that into account, that supply that's been lost to our stock over the last 10 years, that's 105 homes that we have delivered as a net. And there has been an increase of over 300% in terms of temporary accommodation requirements in the city over the last 3 years as well. So some massive challenges for us to face on to. And that's the context that we are looking at when we take forward our affordable housing plan for the next 10 years, really. We know that we've got those massive challenges in the city and that we need to deliver more affordable homes. We are also looking in the context in terms of the national picture, in terms of the government's plan for a 10-year investment in affordable housing, and we really want to match that challenge and ambition moving forward. So that's the context in which we're setting our new plan as we develop and move forward. There's a lot of detail within the report, and we want to just really highlight some of the steps that we want to take now to match that government ambition and opportunity. We have set out 3 steps within the report, and those steps are listed here on the slide. You probably can't see the detail, and there is a lot in the consultation draft of that report. But really to look at those kind of at a high level now, the first thing we really want to do is scale up our delivery programmes, and that's our programmes within our delivery through Section 106 delivery, our direct delivery, and also our delivery for our reg provider partners as well. We have the ambition that we want to deliver 1,500 homes by the end of the plan period, which is more than we've ever delivered before in terms of our annual delivery. So that is our really high level ambition. And we want to do that through scaling up our council housing growth programme, looking to the next phase of that was agreed at Executive Board earlier this year to deliver 1,200 homes as part of that phase 2. We are talking to our reg provider partners about how they face onto the new social and affordable homes programme that has been released by government and is due to be able to bid into that in the next month or so. And our reg provider partners are really facing onto that opportunity and ambition and driving kind of their delivery programmes as we move forward. We want to see how we can maximise mixed tenure development in the city centre. We talked about in the monitoring report how we make sure that delivery in the city centre meets the housing needs for all of our population in the city centre. And through Leeds transformational regeneration and the evolution of the South Bank Newtown details that comes forward, we really want to make sure that we are using the most of those tools as they evolve to make sure that we deliver those mixed communities in the city centre and how we unlock that delivery and growth. We also, within this step, want to ensure that we are delivering in terms of our stock regeneration and estate regeneration opportunities. We know that we have got a number of stock opportunities, such as our REMA programmes, that we really need to face into, and how we replace stock that is no longer fit for purpose, and also drive that investment and renewal within those communities, those existing communities. So that's that first step, and there's a lot there. The second step is how we unlock that delivery, and that is our funding, financing and delivery models. And that looks at kind of how we leverage the new funding tools that come forward. So we've previously had, and as the report details, Brownfield Housing Fund, the investment that is administered through West Yorkshire Combined Authority. We've done really well in leveraging that investment to date, and we really want to see how we can leverage the new funding tools as they come forward through the integrated settlement, the National Housing Delivery Fund and the National Housing Bank to really maximise that investment to unlock delivery and growth. Locally, we have some funds that we can use through our Affordable Housing Community Songs programme, our Right to Buy receipts, council land assets, as well as partner land assets to really leverage how we can deliver and unlock delivery moving forward and maximise the value of those assets and contributions. We also want to see innovation in the delivery of different funding and financing models, innovation in terms of our leasing models and supporting our temporary accommodation challenges moving forward. And then the third point on here is really some of the challenges that we have, both in terms of national policy, but also making sure our local policy is kept up to speed with our ambition and our challenge. And through the local plan update, as Martin will probably come on to, we really want to see how we maximise affordable housing delivery through the Section 106 route of delivery, how we make that work for us as a city, how we look at that in terms of different geographies, in terms of the city centre market, which is slightly different to the other markets, and how we maximise that delivery through our policy renewal and engage with our partners to make that fit for purpose. Secondly, we know that locally we have only got some of the levers. There's a lot of national levers that we need to really influence to drive delivery, such as making sure that the regulation kind of meets our requirements. So we've done a lot of work, for example, in the Right to Buy and the changes to the Right to Buy policy that have happened nationally over the last year. There are a number of other issues in terms of making sure that we've got the right skill set, making sure that we've got the right funding apparatus and approvals in place to really kind of drive and unlock our delivery moving forward. And then lastly, there is kind of continuing kind of that training, kind of growth and engagement programme with members through Scrutiny, and really making sure that we can accelerate that to kind of develop our understanding as we move forward.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. If you're all right to take the slides down just so everyone can see our beautiful faces, I'd be grateful. Thank you. Straight to, oh, yes, Councillor Holland.
Just before we start, I've just got to say that this is a really ambitious plan, but it needs to be ambitious. And all the work that they're doing in the background to make sure that we can deliver what we want to deliver is great work. Thank you.
Okay, who has questions? Councillor Scopes, comments are fine.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's really good news that we are scaling up our affordable homes, and I think that's something that everyone in certainly where I represent will greatly appreciate. I think we all have casework where there clearly isn't enough homes and enough good quality homes. So that, I've said before, I've been to someone's house where you touch the wall in the kitchen and green mould comes off of it. That was a private rented house, and whilst you can take action, there's too many cases like that are still out there. So I just want to preface anything I say with that. The need for affordable homes couldn't be more stark in our city. I just wanted to comment around green spaces as well. I noted Councillor Jones's point about playgrounds and green spaces, particularly in some of our less affluent areas. And I just want to put on record the need for us to, or my comment and my view, that we need to ensure that the green spaces that we still do have in our inner cities remains open and accessible to be used in the future. And I know there's a whole argument about all the green belt, grey belt stuff, but I guess it's not specifically that. It's the little pockets of green that we have. We could try and force more houses in, but I think we need to focus on green space for the families that are already there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Would anyone like to come back on that comment?
I'll make a start, though I'm probably going to talk across onto the plan side. I mean, clearly the local plan and our existing planning framework sets out a range of sites that are allocated for housing and have already been through a test to meet that. And that is where we primarily will look to focus development and obviously a starting point for developers. I think that there's absolutely a balance that needs to be struck, and that is something that has been tested through the new local plan, which has been brought forward, and will be, as part of that process, set out further allocations, and also that link with green space. I'll just pass on to Martin if there's anything else to add.
No, it was just to say that the Leeds local plan has a task of meeting the housing needs that are set by government and that arise locally through investigations like the SHMA that you've seen up on the screen there for affordable housing, alongside protecting the environment, making sure there's sufficient play space and green space accessible to people. So it's a real balancing exercise. And as we bring Leeds local plan material through this scrutiny board, it'd be really helpful to sort of have your views on how we're getting that balance right.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Councillor Jones?
Yeah, can I thank you for this report, and I accept it's challenging, difficult, but it needs to be. This is the biggest thing that affects people in our city, and this is challenging, difficult, and I thank you for the report. And I understand that some people aren't going to like bits of it because where things might be built, but let's be honest, everybody in this city deserves a home that's fit for purpose, and the sooner we finally stop selling stock off, the better in my view, because that has damaged this city significantly. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dye?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I also really welcome this report, and thank you for bringing us it at this stage. I was particularly pleased to see that there's a recognition of the need to address temporary accommodation, which recently has got significantly worse and is an absolute blight on people having to live in places that aren't suitable, that aren't permanent. You can't put roots down, can you? And so that's really good. The partnership working as well, really welcome that. I mean, that's something that really came out of the discussions that we had at the workshops, that it's not something that we as a council can do on our own. It needs really good partnership working. So great to see that that's a thread throughout the report. So their comments really. My question was looking at the section where it talked about careers in construction and the difficulty in securing contractors, and it seems to me that there's a piece of work possibly to be done on looking at how that gap's filled, because in my experience it is a very popular career choice in terms of looking at what young people in schools in Key Stage 4 are interested in doing. So is there work being done around promotion of apprenticeships with companies? Clearly I know there are links with Leeds College of Building, but we're aware that that's something that I think could be a win-win. If we could put forward a cohort of people who could work in developing skills and in sustaining careers, as well as doing what we need to do and get all this stuff built. Thank you.
The employment skills training piece is really important, and I think it's recognising that clearly as part of this agenda we do have a role to play. We obviously have our own council house growth programme that's been referred to already, and within that we have the ability as part of our contractual arrangements with contractors to embed requirements around employment, local employment training, etc. I think, as you know, though, it goes beyond that in terms of working across with our employment and skills team within the council, but also education providers to ensure that we're getting the right courses in the city that front onto the skills needed for future construction. I'm thinking things there around the green agenda, etc., and what that looks like. So it's not something that we're directly having those conversations, but with those links with the employment and skills team and providers, that is being explored. I think in terms of a lot of developers, and particularly RP registered provider partners, they clearly are very passionate about this agenda as well, and as part of their ESG requirements are equally supportive of bringing young people through into the profession. And I think that's something again that we can support at a high level within the council. But yeah, I think there's the attractiveness of the profession is something that is clearly a factor in this, and that needs to be worked on right across the sector as a whole.
Thank you. Did you want to come back in, Kate?
Only to say that I absolutely agree with that, and just my own experience of a lot of the new build work that's happened in my ward. That element of the work has been outstanding. It really has. The connections with schools, work experience, apprenticeship opportunities, local employment opportunities has been really impressive.
Councillor Layton?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the Leeds local plan, I just wondered what feedback had been from RPs and developers. Have they signed up to it? Have they given you any red flags, any indications that certain things won't work? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Layton. So we've had significant engagement with developers and RPs through both the local plan process and the Affordable Housing Growth Plan process. The key points we're getting across are around viability. We've brought to this scrutiny board information about how we assess viability, and we've also brought information about the current market conditions that don't just affect Leeds, they're national, and they do impact the amount of additional planning burden that can be attached to development within the city. But so that will be worked through the Leeds local plan. But part of that is about not only looking at the achievement of affordable housing through developer funding, but also looking at making it easier for those developers who wish to provide 100% affordable housing, and we've got some good examples of that in the city, making it easier for them to do that on sustainable sites, but also looking at where we have local needs right the way across the city and how to reflect those, not just within the main urban area, but within the towns and villages surrounding the main urban area, where there are specific affordable housing needs, but also needs for specific types of housing, such as older persons housing, and maybe a diversified element of sort of bungalow provision, for example. And if that's the case, then there are routes through where higher affordable housing requirements can be placed on such sites, because that's often where the value is within the land, within the city. We're also, through conversations with the industry and RPs, looking at ways in which what's called benchmark transfer prices operate, the price at which the developer, once they've constructed the affordable housing, dispose of that housing to the registered provider. And through bringing a lot more clarity to that process, we can secure viability gains through developments to ensure that we're really getting the most affordable housing on sites that come forward. So yeah, there are continued and active discussions on that.
Thank you. Councillor Goodall?
Thank you. Fully agree with what councillors have been saying about the need, and thank you for the report. My last two councillor surgeries have just been full of people in absolutely dire housing situations, so very much welcome any further affordable housing. I'm going to ask about students again. 60% of the Heading and Hyde Park ward is students. We've got some students in really dire circumstances. I know there was some talk of some of the city centre student accommodation having some kind of affordable element. The recent statistics show that many more students are working part-time, and unfortunately quite a few are now working full-time aside their degree because they just can't afford to live, and that's obviously affecting their studies. I'm thinking particularly of students who are estranged from their families, care leavers, groups like that. Rent is so high, I just wondered if we could factor in something for university students. I mean, there's obviously a hope that the more we provide student accommodation, that prices might come down, but it doesn't seem to be happening yet. So I just wondered if there's anything on that.
Just to add on to your point there, I think it's also worth thinking about the elements of different degrees. I worked full-time during my degree, but I could because it was geography. And it was mainly reading, so I could read in my own time, and I only attended like 6 lectures a week was my timetable. I didn't necessarily go to them all. However, there's other degrees where you're in, my wife, for example, was in labs almost 9 till 5, I think it was. So that's a nuance as well that creates a sort of standard for people. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, there's work going on as part of the Leeds local plan that is looking not only at the type and the mix that I mentioned earlier in terms of that more traditional cluster flat, what you think of as student accommodation rather than the studio type accommodation that's being built in the city centre. How that in itself as a different option can actually create a more affordable choice. But there is also discussion about whether the City Council can apply an affordable element to both of those types of product that are coming forward. So conversations are ongoing with the university, Unipol on behalf of the Leeds students and also the developers. But it is done elsewhere in the country, but it's not routinely done elsewhere in the country. And as with all planning policies, we do have to pass a viability test and ensure that the policies that we do set are actually deliverable and achievable.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson?
Thanks, Chair, and I appreciate you accommodating me because I do have to go in a minute. I think Martin's point's a really good one about bungalows being needed in certain parts of the city, and we see far too often bungalows built and then they become 5-bedroom homes quite quickly, and you lose them. It's the same as the right to buy conversation. Once they're gone, and that is a problem that we have. And I welcome this report about the affordable housing and the work that's going on for the South Bank, Newtown too. I think there's an important bit that comes under this as well, which is affordable living. It's all well and good building affordable housing in places, but actually if that affordable housing is in a place where your transport needs are going to be high, you are not going to be able to access jobs, your kids are not going to be able to go to schools because they're not around, there is not green space to be able to access, then ultimately what is an affordable house becomes a very unaffordable house very, very quickly because of everything that's around you. How do we factor that in when we're doing that sort of planning for where affordable housing goes?
Thank you, Councillor. So whether a home is affordable or not, through planning we would seek to provide it in an accessible location, close to amenities, close to schools, and when there's an ability to be able to take the opportunities of various forms of travel, including active travel. So we wouldn't necessarily differentiate between those two things. A sustainable location should be a sustainable location for all developments. But where we're looking at delivering specific affordable needs in specific villages and towns, then it's absolutely appropriate that we have the discussion and we look at more nuanced provision. Often what that housing can do is it can bring some infrastructure with it, and it can not only sort of bring infrastructure, but it can support local shops, it can support local doctor surgeries where they are in place. So that sort of balance and that interaction between homes and facilities is really important for all forms of housing, but especially for affordable.
Thank you. Councillor Jones wants to come back in, but before you do, this is your final call for anyone else that wants to speak. I've got a bunch of questions for after, and if anyone else wants, then now's your moment to indicate.
I think it's very nice when we talk about the construction industry and expansion, but the former trade union official dealt with that industry,
I will point various things out. What happens is the people get the contract, then subcontract it, sell it to an agency, and what happens is people become technically self-employed. The average span on each site will be 6 weeks for an employer. They have no job security, they have no pension. So can we ensure that where we're involved with that, there is some permanency in this? Because I'll be honest, when my kid says, well, I'm thinking about becoming an electrician, I also says, don't do that, because you'll never get permanent work, you'll never get a pension. So I think there's a real issue there, and the agency will charge up to 40 quid a week for processing the wages. There's real issues there, and encouraging people to go into that industry is fine, but let's be clear about what they're going to get involved with, because I'm passionately angry of how this has been allowed to be what I would call fake employment, because it is fake employment. And I would also point out the HMRC don't do very well at this either, because the things that people claim for, some of it are absolutely ridiculous. That's my concern.
I think that's probably relatively political for an officer to answer. Also, I'm not convinced our officers can in fact change the industry, but the point is well made, and I'm sure Councillor Harland can feed that in when she does national work around housing moving forward. Okay. So, my questions. Are you ready? I'll read them all, and then you can sort of play whack-a-mole with them as you would like, everyone. I've mentioned it already once this meeting about the older people's housing and that churn. So it feels important, again, to raise older people's housing in affordable housing and how we're going to be able to report on that, but also how we know that we're making sure that we're building enough. Is there a risk that the approach to devolved funding could see Leeds losing out? We know that more of that funding's being devolved. Is there scope, and it comes from other members talking about private rented, that doesn't come under our scrutiny board, but actually, is there scope for us to do some joint working with the EHC scrutiny board in relation to standards and affordability within the private rented sector? This is really a question to the board. Is that something you'd like to see happen? Yeah? Okay, we can add that in. I'm interested in whether there's any restrictions that we have on who can buy affordable housing, in the sense that if somebody goes to buy a house and one of them is however much less money, that's going to be the one that sells first if it's just open season on it. We found in the NHS that when you say we'll just get more doctors, it doesn't actually speed up anything in the NHS, because it's one area of a wider system. And I think we run the risk of doing a similar thing when we build capacity within this sector. And actually, are we therefore going to be looking at increasing the number of biodiversity assessors? Are we going to be increasing the number, or helping to increase the number, of people supplying building materials? Do we have confidence in that wider industry? And how are we addressing that risk and making Leeds a more attractive place to work, notwithstanding the fact it's already very attractive to work here? In terms of, and I guess there's a nervousness in saying this, but is there some work to be done looking at the tension between the quality of home delivered and the amount we need to get up on the ground? Because in previous crisis times, there have been houses that are quote unquote good enough in order to make sure that people, I've got so many residents in my ward living on people's dining room floors. I'm not convinced they're worried whether they've got a solar panel. And I guess there's that balance, because I'm definitely not advocating for poor quality homes. But yeah, I just wondered whether there was any discussion around that was worth having. And then also, what opportunities are there to ensure that affordable housing is delivered in locations that make mass transit accessible for those who'll benefit? So are we blocking sites out near to where, I mean, we don't know where the sites are going to be, but where those stations will be? Are we blocking areas to ensure that there is a bulk of affordable housing closest to the mass transit stations so they can benefit from the public transport more than others? Thank you.
Okay, there's a lot there. I hopefully have captured it all. I'll make a start going through some of that list, but I'm going to signpost to colleagues. In terms of the older people's housing, the council has directly delivered a number of schemes. Gascoigne House being a notable one at Middleton, and we're also on site at Middlecross in Armley with an extra care scheme. It may be that Mandy can talk through some of whether we're seeing some of that churn, I suppose, within our own stock of people moving into those properties and then releasing other housing. So I'll signpost that one to Mandy, if you're able to say a few.
Do you want to also introduce, because I forgot again to introduce?
Okay, I'm Mandy Sawyer, Head of Service in the Housing Leeds service. So we don't actually monitor the moves from our general needs housing into extra care. So we monitor the number of new tenancies. So roughly we have between 350 and 450 new lets each year into retirement living and to extra care. That's the council owned schemes, but we're not able to monitor. Well, we don't monitor at the moment. I think you've asked a great question and probably one that we should be able to answer, so we will look at how we can monitor that moving forward. I think we are obviously, in light of the housing pressures, we're doing lots of things to try and ensure that homes go to those that need them most and that we're using our stock as best to meet that need. We are looking, as part of our new build lettings policy, we are about to go out to consultation, and we are proposing that as part of that we do give consideration to right sizing as a preference, so that would give preference to people living in family homes to downsize to smaller accommodation. And then also, as part of our local lettings policies, we have created a new right sizing category which we haven't yet put in place, but certainly looking at those areas of the city where we have got higher levels of under occupation, that we could look at having a right sizing policy which will give preference to those tenants to downsize. So I think I've deviated from the initial question, sorry, but there is some work, but I think we're not able to report numbers at this point.
Just a quick follow-up on that, because, I mean, we've met outside of Scrutiny Board. You know my passion on downsizing as a concept. One of the things that we spoke about was that we didn't know at the time or we couldn't call immediately to hand who was living in bigger accommodation than they necessarily needed. And I guess with those changes in policy you've just mentioned, that will change as well. Are we going to be able to pinpoint who to target almost?
We do have some information, so we started collecting it in our home visit process, and so we're year 2 into collecting that data. So we are getting a good chunk of data around that, which will enable us to target those tenants and encourage that. I need to contact you, Councillor, and have follow up on that discussion, because we are now moving forward looking at some kind of financial, not incentive, but support that we can work with tenants to encourage that downsizing, and also that staff support, so dedicated staff that will support that area of work.
Amazing. I fear I've accidentally done what I tell everyone else off for doing and getting into the minutiae, so I apologise for that. Do you want to carry on with your whack-a-mole? Thanks.
Thank you. And probably just to add, we can do reporting as part of the monitoring around extra care provision. So that's something that we can bring through and at least assist Scrutiny Board with the understanding of delivery. I think the next question was around devolved funding and risk or otherwise of Leeds losing out as part of that. I think it's fair to say that the strategy and the plan that we're talking about today is a means of us being able to set our case out as to the requirement for funding within the city, and what that will deliver and what our ambitions are. And clearly what we're doing, and the Combined Authority have been involved in a lot of our affordable housing conversations with the wider sector, is ensuring that there's at least an understanding of what the city requires. Clearly, each scheme that comes forward will be subject to its own business case, its own bidding process, etc. And clearly the council will be part of that as well, thinking about our own programme of delivery and how we access some of that funding, which we've probably been, we have been precluded from accessing in the past because of the funding model that we've utilised. So we will be in there along with a number of other delivery partners, and I think it's making sure that Leeds has its voice heard, and we continue to engage with the Combined Authority around that. I'll just then answer the other ones that I will pick up on, and then I'll hand on to Krista and others. In terms of capacity within the industry more broadly, that is an issue, and that is something that developers of affordable housing and other forms of development, commercial schemes, etc., are finding. And that's not just in terms of the construction workers, the contractors delivering on site. It's all those technical disciplines to get to that point. So it is an industry-wide issue. That has led to some of the build cost pressures that we've seen right across the sector. And again, I think that comes back to some of the discussion we had earlier about employment training, attractiveness and awareness of the various roles that are throughout the development industry. So that is something that, again, we will work with colleagues to ensure, and the education providers in terms of ensuring that awareness is there. In terms of the quality, I think the question was, are we delivering, essentially, are we maximising the amount that we can deliver, balancing quality and quantum? And I think that's a really important question to ask. I think in Leeds, certainly as part of our own delivery, the standard is very high. And that does come at a cost. And I think as part of moving forward, we are reviewing whether we've got that balance right. And I think it's important that we items of green infrastructure, solar PVs, etc., were raised. I think that again, there's a balance there because that's about addressing fuel poverty, but also the construction of the properties meeting building regs or going beyond building regs in terms of their sustainability standards is also a means of doing that in terms of the built fabric itself. Equally, thinking about the space standards that we have. Again, often in terms of our direct delivery, we're going beyond the requirements in planning and building regs. So again, we need to review that. And there's a piece of work nationally that the council is going to be engaging in, which is reviewing or looking at what that optimum balance might be. So again, we will use that piece of work and our input into that and the output from that research to further inform our new build programme, and certainly in terms of working with RPs as well, getting that into the wider sector. I think you also asked a question about mass transit and looking at where the local, the development opportunities might sit around the mass transit scheme when it comes forward. There's a strategic development framework which has been prepared. commissioned by the Combined Authority, who are leading the mass transit work, which will help to inform where development comes forward in the future around those nodes, those stops on route, etc. Clearly, affordable housing is part of that, along with other forms of development. But I think from a city council perspective, we're already alive to that as an opportunity, looking at where we've got land holdings in and around the mass transit route and the stops that may come forward, and thinking about how they can work. But I think it's yes, clearly mass transit is a key or will be a key piece of transport infrastructure. But going back to some of the conversation we had earlier, it's about ensuring that that affordable housing and housing delivery in its widest sense is delivered in sustainable locations with a range of access and modes of travel to provide access. And thinking in particular around how that housing sits in the context of local facilities, GPs, schools, etc., etc. Martin might want to say something else on that, and what I'm also going to do is just hand on to Krista in terms of the question around who buys affordable housing.
Yeah, just to add quickly, that the key points there around kind of the skills and kind of the resources in the sector, I know through West Yorkshire Housing Partnership that we sit on as a local authority that has been raised as an issue as well. So myself and Mandy sit on that, so we'll make sure that we feed that back to our wider partners and kind of understand kind of the sector response to that as part of the plan. But just in terms of kind of who buys affordable housing, in terms of shared ownership, there are criteria that you have to meet in terms of to acquire a shared ownership home, and that is around your household income being £80,000 or less, and that you cannot afford kind of the deposit required to buy a home on the open market. So there are some key criteria there to make sure that those shared ownership properties are going for people that actually truly need those shared ownership properties.
Anyone else want to come in on any of it? Okay. I guess the only comments that I'd have, and thank you for the detail in your answers there, Mark. I was being facetious around the solar panels more than anything else. It was to illustrate a wider thing. I don't actually, as a geography teacher, have an issue or take umbrage with solar panels. I don't want anyone misquoting me. And then I guess I really agree with your comments about the sustainability of all houses' surroundings. What I'm looking for is that we put into place the controls and those levers of power so that we can prioritise the affordable housing being closest to the places where they will therefore be able to easily access the other infrastructure and the benefits that living in Leeds has if you're able to get to it, if that makes sense. Brilliant. The only other comment that I would do is to put a recommendation that annual updates from Scrutiny on this, which we will get on this paper, focus on the things that are challenging, because this is a wildly challenging and ambitious document, and actually the place we can add the most value as a Scrutiny board is when there's something that is a bit of a challenge in the year or we're not quite meeting that. If we can focus on that, much as that's more difficult to bring into the public eye, it will mean that we can do that out of the box discussion and thinking that really will add value to it, because I think it's fair to say all members across the political spectrum see this work as really key, important and valuable, and thank you so much for bringing it. Does anyone have any comments before I sum up recommendations? Nope. Councillor Harland?
Thank you, Chair. Just like to say thank you for your support and the support on our approach to this. And as an ex-Scrutiny chair myself, I do understand and welcome Scrutiny being the critical friend. I think the comments about local employment were very important. Bearing in mind we sat in a building that was built by 90% of the unemployed local people. So we'll take that on board. And if you ever get a chance to maybe hold a working group or anything, I'd recommend have a visit to Gascoigne House. It's wonderful. You can get to see it, and there's a room there that you could use for a working group. Oh, and just to say thanks again to the officers across the council that are really doing loads of work behind the scenes on this very important thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harland. And the board knows I love a working group and a visit. Don't you worry about that. There'll be plenty. I can see the officers, those of you that can't see on camera, they're starting to cry. Okay, so recommendations. We've got recommendations in the papers, and then the additional ones are to accept the area of challenges being the main focus for the annual reviews. And then I guess it would be good if we can have a recommendation around tasking me with working with the EHC to look at how we can next year do some joint work on private rented stuff. Is that all agreed? Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. So from there, we will move to our final agenda item, which is number 11, which is the next meeting. The next public meeting of the Scrutiny Board will take place at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 24th of January. And of course, there'll be a pre-meeting for all Scrutiny Board members at 9:30 a.m. What did I say? January. Oh, I did say January. February. I'm just reading out. I'm just reading it. I'm going to blame someone else, but I could have checked it. Tuesday, the 24th of February, just in case anyone was excited, there'd be another one next week. However, there will also be an additional remote budget consultation working group taking place after the publication of the exec board papers in February. So please attend, members, if you can. And we've got that data centre visit. So plenty to do in the next month, folks. And with that, I'll close the meeting. Thank you.